The champagne tasted expensive on my tongue, bubbles dancing against the roof of my mouth like tiny, effervescent promises of a better life. A life I didn't have. The wedding reception hummed around me, a symphony of clinking glasses, peals of laughter, and the soft rustle of designer dresses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I sat alone at table 19, the singles table, the afterthought table, we had to invite her but didn't know where to put her table. My black dress was from a department store sale rack, and though I'd spent an hour trying to steam the wrinkles out, it still looked like what it was: cheap. A painful reminder of how far I'd fallen since Mark left me with a mountain of debt and a beautiful 2-year-old daughter who had his eyes. "Mommy misses you, Lily," I whispered to no one, running my finger along the rim of my glass. My daughter was with my sister tonight, probably fast asleep, clutching the stuffed bunny I'd saved 3 weeks of coffee money to buy her for her birthday. The thought of her peaceful face was the only warmth in this cold, glittering ballroom. I hadn't wanted to come to Vanessa's wedding. We'd been friends in college before life took us in dramatically different directions. Her toward success and marriage to a hedge fund manager, me toward single motherhood and working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. But she'd insisted, and I'd been too proud to admit I couldn't afford a gift. The centerpiece of white roses and baby's breath blocked my view of the dance floor, which was just as well. I didn't need to see happy couples spinning beneath crystal chandeliers. I was considering making a discreet exit when I felt it, a shift in the air pressure, as if the atmosphere itself was making way for something dangerous. He entered from a side door, flanked by 2 broad-shouldered men in dark suits who scanned the room with military precision. Even from across the ballroom, I could feel his presence, magnetic, commanding, almost suffocating. The crowd parted unconsciously, conversations faltering mid-sentence. A waiter nearly dropped his tray of champagne flutes. The man wore a black suit that screamed custom Italian craftsmanship, the kind where the price is never discussed because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. His dark hair was trimmed perfectly, accentuating sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could cut glass. But it was his eyes that caught me, cold, calculating, the color of steel on a winter morning. I looked away quickly, knowing instinctively this was someone I shouldn't be caught staring at. But like a moth to flame, my gaze was drawn back to him. He was speaking to one of the groomsmen now. His posture relaxed, yet somehow still vigilant. A third security man stood by the door, hand casually resting inside his jacket in a way that made me certain he was armed. "Who is that?" I whispered to the elderly woman beside me, the only other person at our table who wasn't currently trying to find someone better to talk to. She followed my gaze, and her wrinkled face paled slightly. "That's Dante Russo," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "He owns half the real estate in this city, the other half he influences. Not someone you want to notice, you dear." I nodded and looked down at my half-empty glass, suddenly uncomfortable. I'd heard rumors, of course. Everyone had. The Russo family name was spoken with equal parts respect and fear. They were legitimate businessmen on paper, property developers, investors, philanthropists even. But the whispers told different stories. Stories of competitors who suddenly closed shop and left town. Of politicians who changed their votes after private meetings. Of judges who recused themselves from certain cases. When I looked up again, his eyes were on me. I froze, feeling like a deer caught in headlights. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just watched me with an intensity that made my skin flush hot and cold simultaneously. Then, mercifully, someone approached him, drawing his attention away. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and decided it was definitely time to leave. I'd made my appearance, signed the guest book, hugged the bride. No one would miss me now. I gathered my worn clutch purse and stood, straightening my dress. As I navigated between tables toward the exit, a passing waiter caught his sleeve on a chair, stumbling directly into my path. I swerved to avoid him, but my heel, already wobbly from too many wearings, twisted beneath me. I felt myself falling, bracing for impact and embarrassment. It never came. Instead, strong hands gripped my upper arms, steadying me with effortless strength. I found myself staring at an immaculately pressed white shirt and black tie and the subtle scent of sandalwood and something darker, more primitive, filled my nostrils. "Careful," said a voice above me, low and smooth as aged whiskey. "These floors can be treacherous." I looked up, and my heart stuttered in my chest. Dante Russo was holding me, his steel-gray eyes now close enough that I could see flecks of ice blue in their depths. One of his security men hovered nearby, looking simultaneously bored and alert, if such a combination were possible. Thank you," I managed to stammer, trying to step back. His hands lingered a moment longer than necessary before releasing me. "You're leaving early," he observed. Not a question, a statement of fact. Yes. I have a babysitter waiting. My daughter—" I stopped, wondering why I was explaining myself to this stranger who made my instincts scream danger. Something flickered in his expression at the mention of my daughter. "Family is important," he said, his Italian heritage detectable in the subtle cadence of his words, rather than any pronounced accent. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "Dante Russo." "Ellie Parker," I replied automatically, then immediately regretted giving my real name. But that was ridiculous. This man wouldn't remember me 5 minutes after I walked away. "Ellie," he repeated, as if tasting the syllables. "Short for Eleanor?" "Elizabeth, my grandmother's name." Again, why was I telling him this? His eyes traveled over my face, lingering on details in a way that made me feel simultaneously exposed and seen, truly seen, in a way I hadn't been for a very long time. "You're here alone," he stated, glancing at my bare ring finger. Before I could respond, a commotion near the main entrance caught his attention. His security detail tensed, hands moving subtly toward concealed weapons. I followed their gaze to see several men in suits entering, their bearing similar to Dante's security, but somehow more aggressive, less disciplined. Dante's expression hardened minutely. To anyone else, he might have appeared merely thoughtful, but standing this close, I could feel the sudden tension radiating from him. "The Cavallaro family," he murmured, almost to himself. Uninvited, I'm sure. I didn't know what was happening, but every instinct told me I'd stumbled into something dangerous. "I should go," I said quickly. His attention snapped back to me, calculating. Then, to my complete shock, he slid an arm around my waist, drawing me firmly against his side. "Stay," he said, the word somewhere between a command and a request. "Pretend I'm your husband tonight." My mouth opened in stunned silence. "Excuse me?" "Your presence benefits us both, Ellie Parker." His mouth curved into what might have been a smile on anyone else, but on him looked more like a predator's assessment. "I need to appear settled, and you need protection." "Protection? From what?" I tried to pull away, but his arm was like iron around me. "From me," he said simply. "Because if the Cavallaros believe you're important to me, they'll make it their business to know everything about you by morning. Unless," his voice dropped lower, "they believe you're already under my protection." My heart hammered against my ribs as understanding dawned. This man was offering me a choice that wasn't really a choice. Play along, or potentially become a target in whatever dangerous game was being played between these families. "My daughter," I began, fear making my voice tremble, "will be safer if her mother is seen as connected to me rather than as someone I merely spoke to," he finished, his gaze intense. "One evening, Ellie. A dance, some conversation, leaving together, nothing more." The rational part of my brain screamed at me to run, to get as far away from this man and his world as possible. But another part, the part that had struggled alone for years, that had cried silent tears into my pillow while my daughter slept in the next room, that had endured pitying looks and empty promises of help, that part recognized the undeniable safety that radiated from him. "One dance," I agreed, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. Something like satisfaction flickered in his eyes. Without further discussion, he guided me toward the dance floor, his security detail adjusting their positions seamlessly to accommodate our movement. As we stepped onto the polished floor, his hand settled at the small of my back, warm and steady. The band was playing something slow and melancholy, the kind of song that makes even happy people feel the sweet ache of nostalgia. "They're watching," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear as he drew me closer. "Smile at me like you know me, like you trust me." I looked up into his face, at this dangerous man who was now inexplicably intertwined with my fate, and found myself able to produce a genuine smile, not because I trusted him. I'd have been a fool to trust him, but because for the first time in years, I felt the electric thrill of stepping off the precipice of my carefully controlled, desperately struggling life into something unknown. "That's better," he said softly, his eyes warming a fraction. "Now tell me about your daughter." And so, surrounded by curious onlookers and circled by men who killed for a living, I danced with the devil and told him about my Lily's favorite bedtime story, her love of strawberry ice cream, and how she already knew all her letters at just 2 years old. The strangest part wasn't that I was sharing these intimate details with him. It was how attentively he listened, as if my mundane struggles were somehow fascinating to a man who likely controlled millions of dollars and commanded fear with a mere glance. As the song ended, his hand tightened almost imperceptibly on mine. "The night is young, Mrs. Russo," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "and I believe we have appearances to maintain." The use of his surname paired with mine sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. What had I gotten myself into, and why, despite all logic and self-preservation, did part of me feel more alive than I had in years? The weight of curious eyes followed us as Dante led me from the dance floor to a secluded table near the back of the ballroom. Unlike my assigned table of misfit singles, this one was draped in finer linens with a perfect view of both exits. A reserved sign sat untouched, though I suspected no such reservation had existed until moments before our arrival. One of Dante's men pulled out my chair, while another scanned the surrounding area with practiced efficiency. The casual display of power made my throat dry. "Would you like another drink?" Dante asked, his fingers brushing mine as he helped me into my seat. "Water, please," I replied, suddenly aware of how the champagne had already loosened my inhibitions. I needed clarity now, not courage. He signaled to a waiter who materialized instantly, as if he'd been waiting for the summons. "Acqua frizzante for the lady, and my usual," Dante instructed. The waiter nodded with such deference that I wondered if Dante owned this venue too. When we were relatively alone, his security having taken strategic positions that gave the illusion of privacy, Dante's expression shifted subtly. The performative warmth he'd displayed on the dance floor receded, replaced by something more analytical. "Tell me, Ellie Parker," he said, leaning slightly forward. "How does a woman like you end up alone at a wedding like this?" "A woman like me?" I echoed, unsure if I should be offended. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been amusement. Intelligent, beautiful, devoted to her child, yet isolated at a table of strangers. I looked down at my hands, at the faint calluses from work and the short, unpolished nails. "My friend Vanessa, the bride. We went to college together." "Different lives now, different choices," he corrected, his eyes never leaving my face. "Not all of us have the luxury of choice, Mr. Russo." "Dante," he said, his voice softer, "if you're to be my wife for the evening, you should use my given name." The drinks arrived, saving me from having to respond. My sparkling water came in a crystal glass with a twist of lemon, while his drink appeared to be whiskey, neat. He didn't touch it. "The man who left you and your daughter," he continued, as if there had been no interruption. "Where is he now?" The directness of the question startled me. "How did you— Your ring finger has a faint tan line. You mentioned a daughter but no husband, and your eyes have the particular wariness of someone who's been betrayed, not bereaved." His analysis was clinical, detached, yet somehow intimate in its accuracy. I swallowed hard. Mark left when Lily was 6 months old. He emptied our joint account on his way out. Last I heard, he was in Seattle with his administrative assistant. Dante's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "He provides for his child?" I laughed. A short, bitter sound. "The court ordered support, but he's always between jobs or having cash flow issues. I stopped counting on it. And so you work. More than one job, I think." Again, his perception unnerved me. "Bookkeeping for a construction company during the day. Waitressing 3 nights a week. And who watches your daughter?" My sister helps when she can. There's a daycare near my apartment that offers a sliding fee scale. I didn't mention the nights I'd brought Lily to the restaurant, letting her sleep in a makeshift bed of coats in the break room, while I served tables of people who spent more on wine than I made in a week. Dante nodded, processing this information with an intensity that made me wonder why he cared. Across the room, I noticed one of the men who had caused the earlier tension watching us. Unlike Dante's security detail, who blended into the background despite their size, this man wanted to be seen observing us. Dante followed my gaze. Antonio Cavallaro, he said quietly. The youngest son. Impulsive. Ambitious. Dangerous primarily because he has something to prove. And what do you have to prove? I asked before I could stop myself. His eyes snapped back to mine, surprise flickering briefly before his composure returned. An interesting question, Ellie. Most people are too afraid to ask me anything so direct. Should I be afraid? Yes, he answered simply. But not, I think, for the reasons you imagine. The honesty in his response sent a shiver down my spine. Before I could reply, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening for a fraction of a second, before returning to neutral. We should circulate, he said, standing and extending his hand to me. My wife wouldn't hide in a corner all evening. I placed my hand in his, noticing how small mine looked enveloped in his. And what kind of wife would I be exactly? What's our story? Something like approval flashed in his eyes. Married 3 years, no elaborate proposal. I saw what I wanted and pursued it directly. You were reluctant at first, concerned about my business interests, but eventually decided the benefits outweighed the risks. That's specific, I said, as he guided me toward a group of guests. The most convincing lies contain elements of truth, he murmured against my ear, his arm sliding possessively around my waist. For the next hour, I played the role of Mrs. Russo with a conviction that surprised even me. Dante introduced me to business associates and acquaintances with such natural ease that I could almost believe we were truly married. I smiled at the right moments, laughed at insider jokes I didn't understand, and leaned into his touch as if it were familiar rather than alien. You're a natural, he whispered during a brief moment alone, his lips brushing my temple in a gesture that appeared affectionate, but felt calculating. I'm impressed. I was in theater in high school, I replied, trying to ignore the warmth spreading through me at his approval, though I never imagined this particular role. His response was interrupted by the arrival of an older man who commanded nearly as much deference as Dante himself. His gray hair was immaculately styled, his tuxedo impeccable, and his smile didn't reach his cold brown eyes. Dante, he greeted, his voice raspy from years of cigars. I was surprised to hear you attended tonight. Victor. Dante nodded, his posture subtly shifting to place his body partially between me and the newcomer. I could say the same of you. Well, when I heard the Russos would be represented, I could hardly stay away. Victor's gaze slid to me, assessing and dismissive in equal measure. And who is this lovely creature? My wife, Eleanor, Dante answered before I could speak, his tone carrying a warning edge that made the older man's eyebrows rise slightly. Wife? How unexpected. Victor extended his hand to me. Victor Cavallaro, my dear. A pleasure. I took his hand, fighting the urge to wipe my palm afterward. Likewise. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. Strange that I received no invitation to the wedding. I thought our families had an understanding about such significant events. We kept it private, Dante replied smoothly. Ellie prefers to avoid the spotlight. And given recent tensions, I'm sure you understand my desire to protect what's mine. The possessive claim in his voice should have offended me. Instead, I felt a traitorous thrill at being claimed so definitively, even in pretense. Of course, Victor nodded, though his expression suggested he believed none of it. And the child? Is she yours as well? My breath caught. How did he know about Lily? Dante's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on my waist. My stepdaughter, Dante answered, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of steel. Though I consider her mine in all the ways that matter. Family is family, Victor, as you well know. The implied threat hung in the air between them, wrapped in the veneer of civility, but unmistakable nonetheless. Victor smiled thinly. Indeed. Well, I won't keep you from your guests. A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Russo. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other. As he walked away, I exhaled shakily. He knows about Lily. How? Information is currency, Dante replied, guiding me toward the bar. The moment I singled you out, they would have started digging. Basic details would be easy to find. Fear clenched my stomach. I need to call my sister. Already taken care of, Dante interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. While you were speaking with the bride earlier, I had my people secure your sister's apartment, discreetly, he added, seeing my expression. They believe it's routine security for the building. No one will connect it to you unless they're looking very carefully. I stared at him, torn between gratitude and horror. You had no right. I brought you into this. He cut me off, his voice low. I will ensure you and yours remain unharmed. Consider it the cost of doing business. This isn't business for me, I hissed, keeping my smile fixed for any observers. This is my life, my daughter's life. Something flashed in his eyes, not anger, but something equally intense. For tonight, they are one and the same. Trust me or don't, but understand that I protect what's mine, even temporarily. Before I could form a retort, the bride appeared at my elbow, slightly flushed from dancing and champagne. Ellie! Vanessa exclaimed, her eyes widening as she registered who I was with. I've been looking everywhere for you. Congratulations, I managed, acutely aware of Dante's hand still at my waist, warm and proprietary. Beautiful ceremony. Vanessa's gaze bounced between us, confusion and curiosity evident. Thank you. I don't believe we've met, she said to Dante, extending her hand. Dante Russo, he replied, taking her hand briefly. A pleasure. You've been friends with my wife for some time, I understand. The word wife hit Vanessa like a physical blow. Her perfectly made-up eyes widened comically. Wife? Ellie, you got married? When? How? Why didn't you tell me? The hurt in her voice was genuine, making me squirm with guilt, despite knowing this was all fabrication. Before I could stammer a response, Dante interjected smoothly. The fault is entirely mine, he said, his charm dialed to a setting that had Vanessa automatically softening. I'm afraid I'm rather private about my personal life, and insisted on keeping our relationship quiet. Business complications, you understand. Oh, of course. Vanessa nodded, as if she encountered mob-adjacent relationships regularly. Her eyes darted to his security detail, realization dawning. Well, I'm just so happy for you, Ellie. You deserve this. The sincerity in her voice made my chest ache. Vanessa had drifted away after college, our lives diverging as mine imploded and hers ascended. But in this moment I glimpsed the friend she had once been. Thank you, I whispered, accepting her hug. Over her shoulder, I saw Dante watching us with that same analytical intensity, as if cataloging every reaction, every emotion that crossed my face. When Vanessa was called away by her new husband, I turned to Dante. This is getting complicated, I muttered. Now she thinks we're actually married. What happens tomorrow when the truth comes out? Who says it will? He countered, checking his watch. It's nearly midnight. Time for us to make our exit, I think. Exit? But the Cavalleros will be watching to see if we leave together, he explained, already guiding me toward the coat check. Our departure needs to look convincing. My pulse quickened. And what exactly does convincing entail? He looked down at me, and for the first time that evening, I caught a glimpse of something genuine in his expression, something almost like hunger. Nothing you need fear, he said, his voice lower. Though, if you could manage to look at me as if you might want me to touch you later, it would help our credibility considerably. Heat rushed to my face. I'm not that good an actress, no? His thumb traced a small circle against the small of my back. Then perhaps you're not acting at all. Before I could retort, we reached the coat check where my threadbare wool coat looked pathetically out of place among the furs and designer labels. I expected Dante to look disdainful, but instead, He helped me into it with surprising gentleness. "One more hour," he murmured as we walked toward the exit, his security team moving into formation around us. "Then you can return to your life as if tonight never happened." But as we stepped into the cold night air, his arm around my shoulders and his body radiating heat beside mine, I couldn't help wondering if anything would ever be the same again. The sleek black Bentley waited at the curb, its engine purring softly like a predator at rest. One of Dante's security men opened the rear door, while another scanned the street with vigilant eyes. The third conferred quietly with the driver, who remained behind the wheel. "After you," Dante said, his hand at the small of my back guiding me forward. I hesitated. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," he replied, his expression giving nothing away. "We need to maintain appearances a while longer. I need to get home to my daughter." "Your sister has been informed that you'll be late," he interrupted smoothly. "As I said, it's been handled." Anger flared in my chest. "You had no right to—" "Get in the car, Ellie," he said, his voice quiet but with an edge of command that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Please." It was the please that caught me off guard. From everything I'd observed tonight, Dante Russo wasn't a man accustomed to saying please. The unexpected courtesy, coupled with the hard reality that I was now involved in whatever dangerous game was playing out between these families, propelled me forward into the car's luxurious interior. The leather seat welcomed me with buttery softness, a stark contrast to the cracked vinyl of my own second-hand sedan. Dante slid in beside me, his presence immediately filling the confined space. The door closed with a solid thunk, sealing us inside a bubble of opulence and tension. "You're angry," he observed, as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. Two identical black SUVs flanked us, one ahead and one behind. "Wouldn't you be?" I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've dragged me into something dangerous, made decisions about my family without consulting me, and now you're essentially kidnapping me." A flash of something, irritation, amusement, crossed his face. "If I were kidnapping you, Ellie, we wouldn't be having this conversation." I turned to face the window, watching the city lights blur past. We were heading downtown, away from my modest apartment in the suburbs, away from Lily. "Where are you taking me?" "My penthouse," he replied. "It's the most secure location, and the Cavalleros will expect us to spend the night together." My head snapped back toward him. "I am not spending the night with you." For the first time, a genuine smile curved his lips, transforming his severe features into something almost boyish. "I have 5 bedrooms, Ellie. You'll have your privacy." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" His eyes held mine, searching. "You've spent the evening wondering if I intend to collect some form of payment for my protection. It's a reasonable concern." The directness of his assessment left me momentarily speechless. He continued before I could formulate a response. "I don't take unwilling women to my bed," he said, his tone matter of fact. "It doesn't interest me. And willing ones?" The question escaped before I could stop it. His smile deepened, revealing the barest hint of a dimple in his left cheek. "There haven't been as many as you might imagine. My lifestyle doesn't lend itself to conventional relationships." The vulnerability in that admission caught me off guard. Before I could examine it further, the car slowed, turning into an underground parking garage beneath one of the most exclusive addresses in the city. Unlike the public entrance with its gleaming marble and uniformed doormen, this access point was utilitarian and heavily secured. A guard stepped forward, examined our vehicle, then waved us through after receiving a nod from our driver. "Home sweet home," Dante murmured as we pulled into a private bay, marked with his initial. Within moments, I was ushered from the car into a private elevator that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan. Dante's security detail remained professionally detached, but I felt their constant assessment. I wondered what they saw when they looked at me, a liability perhaps, or just another of their boss's temporary distractions. The elevator ascended silently, its mirrored walls reflecting infinite versions of us. The powerful man in his perfect suit, and the out-of-place woman in her discount dress, standing just far enough apart to suggest unease. "My head of security, Marco, will remain on this floor tonight," Dante said, breaking the silence. "If you need anything, or if you become concerned about my intentions, you can call for him. I studied his reflection. You're giving me a safeguard against you in your own home? I want you to feel secure. Why? The question was barely above a whisper. Before he could answer, the elevator doors slid open to reveal his penthouse. I stepped out and froze, momentarily stunned by what I saw. I had expected cold opulence, the sterile luxury of old money or the gaudy display of new wealth. Instead, I found myself in a space that was undeniably masculine, but surprisingly warm. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights spread below like fallen stars. The furnishings were modern yet comfortable, rich leather, natural wood, and touches of deep blue and burgundy that lent warmth to the open space. But what truly caught me off guard were the books. Hundreds of them lining built-in shelves, stacked on side tables, even open on the kitchen counter as if recently abandoned. Not display books chosen for their matching leather bindings, but real books with creased spines and dog-eared pages. You read, I said stupidly. Dante observed my reaction with quiet interest. Did you expect me to be illiterate? No, I trailed off, embarrassed by my assumption. You expected a more stereotypical environment, he finished for me, moving past to hang his suit jacket over a chair. Secret doors, perhaps? Mounted animal heads? Gold-plated fixtures? The gentle mockery in his tone made me flush. Something like that. He loosened his tie but didn't remove it. Would you like a drink? Or perhaps tea? Tea would be nice, I admitted, suddenly aware of how tired I felt. He nodded, moving to the kitchen with casual confidence. I followed, watching as he filled an electric kettle and retrieved a wooden box containing an assortment of teas. You do this yourself? I asked. No staff? I value my privacy, he replied, selecting a chamomile blend. Staff means eyes and ears in my personal space. I have a housekeeper who comes during the day, but evenings are my own. The domesticity of watching this dangerous man prepare tea was surreal. His movements were efficient and practiced, suggesting this wasn't performance but routine. May I use your bathroom? I asked, needing a moment alone to gather my thoughts. He gestured down a hallway. Second door on the right. First door will be your room for tonight, if you wish to freshen up. You'll find everything you need. I nodded my thanks and retreated down the hallway, feeling his eyes follow me until I was out of sight. The guest room was tastefully appointed in soothing shades of blue and gray. On the bed lay a silk pajama set with the tag still attached and a fluffy robe. In the adjoining bathroom, I found a new toothbrush, high-end toiletries, and even makeup remover. Everything is handled, I murmured to myself, remembering his words from earlier. The efficiency was both impressive and unsettling. I used the facilities, then took a moment to stare at my reflection in the mirror. My carefully applied makeup had begun to fade, and a strand of hair had escaped from my updo. I looked tired, but strangely alive, my eyes brighter than they had been in months. When I returned to the kitchen, Dante was leaning against the counter, his own tie now removed, and the top buttons of his shirt undone. The slight dishevelment humanized him in a way that was more disarming than it should have been. He handed me a steaming mug, then led me to the living room where we sat on opposite ends of a deep leather sofa. Outside, the city sparkled below us, and I felt a strange vertigo, not from the height, but from how far removed this moment was from my everyday existence. Ask, he said after I'd taken a few sips of the perfectly brewed tea. Ask what? Whatever it is that has you looking at me like I'm a puzzle you're trying to solve. I considered deflecting, then decided on honesty. Why did you choose me tonight? There must have been less complicated options if you just needed a female companion for appearances. He studied me over the rim of his mug. The Cavallaro family has been encroaching on my territory for months. Small provocations, testing boundaries. Tonight's appearance at the wedding was deliberate, a statement that they don't respect the old agreements. That doesn't answer my question. Patience, Ellie, he chided gently. I needed to send a counter message. Had I brought a known associate or one of the women I occasionally see socially, they would have interpreted it as business as usual. But you... He paused, his eyes tracing my face. You were an unknown variable. Bringing an unknown woman, making her appear to be my wife, suggests I've been keeping secrets. It makes them uncertain. So I was, what? A strategic surprise? Precisely. He set his mug down on the coffee table. Also, you have honest eyes. The comment caught me off guard. What does that mean? You don't conceal your emotions well. When you looked at me on that dance floor, your fear and fascination were genuine. No hired companion could have conveyed that authenticity. I didn't know whether to be flattered or offended. So my transparency was useful. Extraordinarily so. He leaned forward slightly. The question is why you agreed. Now it was my turn to be analyzed. I considered my answer carefully. At first, fear, I admitted. You didn't really give me a choice. But then I trailed off, searching for words to describe the complex cocktail of emotions that had kept me by his side all evening. Then, he prompted, then it became something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or, I hesitated, embarrassed by my own truth. Or the relief of being protected rather than being the protector. He finished for me, his insight striking uncomfortably close to home. I looked away, out at the city lights. Since Mark left, everything has been on my shoulders. Every bill, every decision, every midnight fever or nightmare. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning 1 inch at a time. And tonight, someone else took the weight. He observed quietly. Yes. The admission felt both shameful and liberating. But it's an illusion, isn't it? Tomorrow I go back to reality. Something shifted in his expression. A calculation forming behind those steel-gray eyes. What if you didn't have to? Not completely. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? The cavalleros will be watching you now, at least for a while. They'll expect our relationship to continue. It would be safer, for both you and your daughter, if we maintained the appearance of connection. For how long? I asked, caution warring with an inexplicable excitement. Until the current situation stabilizes. A few weeks, perhaps a month. I set my mug down with a sharp click against the glass table. You want me to pretend to be your wife for a month? That's insane. Not my wife, he corrected. That would require too many legal complexities. My companion would suffice. Someone I'm seen with regularly, who perhaps stays at my residence occasionally. And what would this arrangement entail exactly? I asked, proud of how steady I kept my voice. Dinner once or twice a week, attending certain events with me, perhaps the occasional overnight stay here with your daughter welcome, of course. His expression remained neutral, businesslike. In return, I would ensure your financial situation improves considerably. I stood abruptly. I'm not a prostitute, Mr. Russo. I never suggested you were, he replied, remaining seated. His calmness in the face of my outburst was infuriating. I'm offering a mutually beneficial arrangement. You provide a service, your presence, which humanizes me in certain circles and keeps my enemies uncertain. I provide compensation and protection. And what happens when this arrangement ends? When I'm no longer useful? For the first time, a flash of genuine emotion crossed his face, something like regret, or perhaps resignation. Then you go back to your life, significantly more financially secure, and we part ways amicably. And if I refuse? He stood then, moving closer until I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Then I ensure your safety for the next several days while interest in you fades, and we never see each other again. The option to walk away should have been a relief. Instead, it left me with a hollow feeling I couldn't quite name. Why me? I asked again, needing to understand. The real reason. Dante was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching mine as if debating how much truth to reveal. Finally he spoke, his voice lower than before. When I saw you sitting alone at that table, watching others live the life you thought you'd have, I recognized something. He paused, seeming to choose his words with unusual care. Something I understand. The weight of responsibility, the loneliness of carrying burdens others don't see. He reached out, his fingertips brushing a strand of hair from my face with unexpected gentleness. You're stronger than you realize, Ellie Parker. And strength interests me. My breath caught at his touch, my skin tingling where his fingers had grazed it. The air between us seemed to thicken. charged with something dangerous and electric. For one wild moment, I thought he might kiss me. Worse, that I might want him to. The moment shattered when his phone vibrated. He checked it with a slight frown, then looked back at me. "It's late," he said. His voice returned to its usual controlled timbre. "You should rest. We can discuss this further in the morning." The abrupt dismissal left me off balance. "And if my answer is no, if I want to leave now, then Marco will drive you home immediately," he replied without hesitation. "But I hope you'll consider my offer overnight, for both our sakes." I nodded, suddenly exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the evening. "Good night, then." "Good night, Ellie," he said softly. "Sleep well." As I retreated to the blue guest room, I tried to sort through the tangle of my emotions: fear, curiosity, attraction, caution, all warring within me as I slipped into the borrowed silk pajamas and slid between sheets finer than any I'd ever touched. I should have been planning my escape, figuring out how to extract myself from this dangerous world I'd stumbled into. Instead, my last thought before sleep claimed me was of Dante's face when he'd spoken of recognizing something in me. The brief, unguarded moment when I'd glimpsed a loneliness that matched my own. I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the distant sounds of the city below. For a disorienting moment, I didn't remember where I was. The silky sheets and plush mattress were too luxurious to be my own worn bed. Then last night came rushing back. The wedding. Dante Russo, his unexpected proposition. I sat up, pushing tangled hair from my face. A glance at the bedside clock showed it was just past 7, earlier than Lily would normally wake on a weekend. The thought of my daughter sent a pang through my chest. This was the first night I'd spent away from her since Mark left. After a quick shower in the marble bathroom, complete with toiletries that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, I dressed in my wrinkled black dress from the night before. I hesitated at the bedroom door, gathering courage before venturing out to face Dante and whatever decision awaited me. The hallway was quiet, but I could smell coffee brewing. Following the scent, I found myself not in the kitchen, but in a spacious home office where Dante sat behind a mahogany desk, already dressed in casual but clearly expensive dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his eyes appear more gray than blue in the morning light. He looked up as I appeared in the doorway, his expression giving nothing away. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I should have, considering the circumstances," I admitted. A small smile touched his lips. "Coffee? There's breakfast in the kitchen." "Just coffee, thank you. I should get home to Lily." He nodded and rose, leading me to the kitchen where a full breakfast spread waited. Fresh fruit, pastries, eggs kept warm in covered dishes. Despite my words, my stomach growled audibly. "Perhaps a quick bite while your coffee cools," he suggested, handing me a steaming mug. "Your daughter is fine, by the way. My people checked 20 minutes ago." The casual mention of his surveillance sent a chill through me. "You're having my family watched. Until we determine our path forward, yes." He leaned against the counter, watching me with that steady, assessing gaze. "It's for their protection, not surveillance." I wanted to argue, but found myself filling a plate instead, suddenly ravenous. The first bite of perfectly prepared omelet nearly made me moan. "You've made a decision," Dante observed, sipping his own coffee. I set down my fork. "How do you know that? Your shoulders are set differently than last night. You've resolved something in your mind." His perception was unsettling. "I have conditions," I said, meeting his gaze directly. Interest flickered in his eyes. "I'm listening." "First, no more decisions about my family without consulting me. No security I don't know about. No messages to my sister. Nothing." He inclined his head slightly. "Reasonable, though I reserve the right to act without consultation in genuine emergencies. Second, I need to understand what I'm getting into. No half-truths or convenient omissions about why the Cavalleros are watching us, or what dangers might come my way." "Also reasonable," he agreed, "though some information is safer for you not to have." "Third," I continued, ignoring his qualification, "this arrangement has a clear end date. 1 month, as you suggested. After that, you ensure any connection to you doesn't follow me or endanger my future." "Agreed." His quick acquiescence surprised me. "Fourth, the compensation needs to be specific and documented. This isn't about extorting you," I hurried to clarify. but I need to know exactly what I can count on. Something like respect glimmered in his expression. Of course. I'll have papers drawn up today. And finally, I said, my voice softening slightly, I need to know that Lily will be safe, not just physically, but that she won't be exposed to aspects of your world that a child shouldn't see. At the mention of my daughter, Dante's expression changed subtly. The calculation in his eyes gave way to something warmer, almost wistful. Children should be protected from darkness, he said quietly. On that, we are in complete agreement. The sincerity in his voice reassured me more than any promise could have. I nodded, taking another sip of the excellent coffee. Then I accept your proposal, 1 month of companionship, in exchange for financial support and protection. A business arrangement, he said, watching me closely. Exactly. I met his gaze steadily, ignoring the flutter in my stomach when his eyes darkened slightly. Then we should discuss logistics, he said, setting down his coffee cup. I'll have Marco drive you home this morning. Tomorrow evening I'll send a car for you and your daughter. You'll both join me for dinner here. Here? I asked, surprised. You want me to bring Lily here? If we're to maintain this illusion, the Cavalleros need to see that your daughter is also under my protection. His expression softened fractionally. Besides, it will be good for her to become comfortable with me. The thought of my sweet, shy daughter meeting this dangerous man both concerned and intrigued me. She's very reserved with strangers. I'm good with children, he said simply. Something about the quiet confidence of that statement made me believe him. All right, I agreed. Dinner tomorrow, but nothing fancy. Lily's favorite food is mac and cheese. A genuine smile transformed his face, revealing that disarming dimple again. Mac and cheese it is. 2 hours later, I was back in my small apartment, hugging Lily, as if I'd been gone for weeks instead of overnight. My sister Sarah watched with thinly veiled curiosity. So, she said when Lily had returned to her coloring books, are you going to tell me what happened, and why there's a guy who looks like a government agent parked outside? I took a deep breath, launching into the edited version of events I'd prepared during the car ride home. I told her about meeting Dante at the wedding, describing him as a wealthy businessman who'd shown unexpected interest in me. I explained that we were dating now, keeping the time frame deliberately vague. I didn't mention the Cavalleros or any hint of danger. Sarah's eyes widened progressively during my explanation. Let me get this straight, she said when I finished. You met a rich, hot guy at a wedding and now he wants to date you? A single mom with a crappy apartment and 2 jobs? I winced at her bluntness. It's complicated. Complicated like he's married, or complicated like he's into weird stuff? Her protective instincts were flaring. Neither, I assured her, just different worlds. He knows it's temporary. Something in my tone must have betrayed more than I intended, because Sarah's expression softened. Oh, Ellie, you like him? It's not like that, I protested too quickly. It's an arrangement that benefits us both. An arrangement? Sarah's eyebrows shot up. Are you his mistress or something? No, God, Sarah, it's just, he needs someone to accompany him to some events, and I trailed off, unsure how to explain the financial aspect without sounding exactly like what Sarah was suggesting. You need what? She pressed. A break, I admitted quietly, glancing at Lily, who was happily absorbed in her coloring. Some breathing room, a chance to get ahead instead of always being behind. Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. He's helping you financially, I nodded, bracing for judgment. Instead, Sarah surprised me by reaching for my hand. Good. It's about time someone helped you after everything you've been through. Her expression turned fierce. But if he hurts you, or if he's weird with Lily, he won't be, I said with more confidence than I should have felt about a man I barely knew. He's different than I expected. Sarah studied me for a moment, then sighed. Just be careful, okay? Men like that. Men with power. They're used to getting what they want. I know, I assured her, thinking of the intensity in Dante's eyes when he touched my face. I'll be careful. After Sarah left, The day passed in the comfortable routine I'd established with Lily: playtime, lunch, her afternoon nap during which I caught up on laundry. But beneath the normalcy ran an undercurrent of anticipation. Tomorrow, these two separate worlds would collide when I brought my daughter to Dante's penthouse. That evening, as I tucked Lily into her small bed with its princess sheets, purchased secondhand but still her pride and joy, she looked up at me with her serious brown eyes. "Mommy, who was the man in the car?" I froze. "What man, sweetheart?" "The man who brought you home. He had big shoulders," she demonstrated by puffing up her tiny frame. "That was a friend of Mommy's," I said carefully. "His name is Marco. Is he nice?" I thought of Marco's stoic expression and the gun I was certain he carried beneath his impeccable suit. "Yes, he's nice. He helps keep people safe." Lily considered this with the solemn concentration only a toddler can muster. "Like a police officer?" "Something like that," I hedged. "Lily, tomorrow we're going to have dinner with another friend of Mommy's. His name is Dante." "Is he nice too?" she asked, clutching her stuffed bunny closer. The question gave me pause. Was Dante Russo nice? He was dangerous, powerful, compelling, but nice. "He's different," I said finally. "But I think you'll like him, and he wants to meet you very much." This seemed to satisfy her, and she snuggled deeper into her covers. "Can Bunny come too?" I smiled, brushing her soft hair back from her forehead. "Of course Bunny can come." "Good," she mumbled, already drifting toward sleep. "Bunny keeps me brave." Her words lingered in my mind long after she'd fallen asleep. I sat at my small kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea, and staring at my phone where a text message from an unknown number glowed on the screen. "Car will arrive at 5:30 tomorrow. No need to dress formally." Such a simple message, yet it represented a turning point I could feel in my bones. I was about to step into Dante Russo's world. And worse, I was bringing my daughter with me. The rational part of me screamed that this was madness, that no amount of financial security was worth entangling Lily in a world that might hold danger. Yet beneath that fear lurked something else. A humming anticipation I couldn't quite suppress. In the brief time I'd spent with Dante, I'd felt more seen, more alive than I had in years. The way he looked at me, as if I were a puzzle worth solving rather than a burden to be pitied, had awakened something I'd thought long dead. 1 month, I whispered to myself. Just 1 month to get ahead. Then back to reality. But as I finally crawled into my own bed, so cold and empty after the luxury of his guest room, I wondered which was the true reality, the daily struggle I'd known since Mark left, or the electric possibility that had sparked to life in Dante's presence. At precisely 5:30 the next evening, a sleek black car pulled up outside our apartment building. I had spent the afternoon preparing Lily, explaining that we were going to have dinner with a special friend in a very tall building with big windows. She seemed more excited about the elevator ride than meeting Dante. I had dressed us both carefully, Lily in her nicest dress with tiny flowers, and myself in slim black pants and a soft blue sweater that brought out my eyes. Not too formal, but not the worn jeans and faded t-shirts that comprised most of my wardrobe. I wanted to show Dante that while I might need his financial help, I wasn't completely pathetic. Marco stepped out of the car and nodded politely. "Ms. Parker, Miss Lily." My daughter stared up at him with wide eyes. "You have big shoulders," she announced, repeating her observation from yesterday. The corner of Marco's mouth twitched. "The better to keep people safe, miss." To my surprise, he had installed a proper car seat for Lily. As I buckled her in, I noticed it was new and high-end, not the second-hand model we used in my car. "Mr. Russo's instructions," Marco explained, seeing my expression. The drive to Dante's building was filled with Lily's excited commentary about everything we passed. When we finally pulled into the private garage, she clapped her hands at the sight of the elevator. "Does it go super high?" she asked Marco earnestly. "All the way to the top," he confirmed, his professional demeanor softening slightly. When the elevator doors opened onto the penthouse, Dante was waiting. He'd dressed down in dark jeans and a light gray sweater that looked casually expensive. His eyes found mine first, a brief assessment that felt like a physical touch, before shifting to Lily. His entire demeanor changed as he crouched down to her level. "You must be Lily," he said, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. "I'm Dante." "Thank you for coming to dinner." Lily clutched her bunny tighter and pressed against my leg, suddenly shy. "This is Bunny," she mumbled, holding the stuffed animal slightly forward as both shield and introduction. "It's an honor to meet you both," Dante replied with perfect seriousness. He glanced up at me, a question in his eyes. I nodded slightly, and he continued. "Would Bunny like to see the view? You can see the whole city from here." Interest overcame Lily's shyness. "Can we, Mommy?" "Of course," I said, unable to suppress a smile at Dante's unexpectedly perfect approach to my reserved daughter. He led us to the windows, but remained a respectful distance from Lily, allowing her to adjust to his presence without pressure. I watched in fascination as this dangerous man pointed out landmarks to my daughter with infinite patience, answering her endless questions about how high we were and if we could see airplanes. "Something smells yummy," Lily announced suddenly, turning toward the kitchen. "That would be dinner," Dante replied. "I promised your mom we'd have mac and cheese." Lily's eyes widened. "That's my favorite. What a coincidence," he said with mock surprise. "Mine too." Dinner was served at the kitchen island rather than the formal dining table I'd glimpsed earlier. The mac and cheese was homemade, not from a box, but Lily didn't seem to mind the upgrade. There were also roasted vegetables and fresh bread. Simple, but perfect. "Did you make this?" I asked Dante quietly, while Lily concentrated on spearing a piece of broccoli. He nodded. "I told you, I value my privacy. Learning to cook was a necessity." "It's delicious," I admitted, watching him with new eyes. The image of Dante Russo cooking comfort food for a toddler was incongruous with everything I thought I knew about him. "I have something for after dinner," he told Lily, who immediately perked up. "But only if your mom says it's okay." She turned to me with pleading eyes. "Please, Mommy?" "That depends on what it is," I said, giving Dante a questioning look. "Ice cream," he replied, "and perhaps a movie. I've been told Frozen is quite popular with young ladies these days." Lily gasped in delight, and I found myself laughing at his solemn delivery. "You've done your research." A hint of that dimple appeared. "I like to be prepared." After dinner, while Dante set up the movie in the living room, I helped Lily wash her hands. "What do you think of Mr. Dante?" I asked carefully. She considered this with adorable seriousness. "He's tall, and he makes good mac and cheese." Then, leaning closer as if sharing a great secret, she added, "I think Bunny likes him." Coming from Lily, this was a ringing endorsement. The three of us settled on the large sofa to watch the movie, with Lily insisting on sitting between us. As animated princesses sang about letting things go, I found myself watching Dante more than the screen. He seemed genuinely engaged in the film, asking Lily quiet questions about the characters and listening to her explanations with real interest. Halfway through, Lily's eyelids began to droop, and she gradually leaned against Dante's arm. Instead of stiffening or moving away, he adjusted slightly to make her more comfortable. The sight of my daughter trustingly falling asleep against this man who inspired fear in grown men made my throat tight with unexpected emotion. When the movie ended, Dante carefully shifted Lily so I could pick her up. "There's a room prepared for her," he said softly. "And for you, if you'd like to stay. Or Marco can drive you home." The idea of transferring a sleeping Lily back to the car, then up to our apartment, was exhausting to contemplate. "We'll stay," I decided, "if it's not too much trouble." "Never," he said simply. He led me to a room I hadn't seen the previous night. Unlike the coolly elegant guest room I'd used, this one had been transformed with a child-sized bed complete with princess sheets similar to Lily's own. A small lamp cast star-shaped patterns on the ceiling, and a selection of children's books sat on the nightstand. "When did you do this?" I whispered as I laid Lily down. "Yesterday," he replied, remaining in the doorway. "I want her to feel comfortable here." I covered my daughter with the soft blanket and placed Bunny in her arms before joining Dante in the hallway, pulling the door halfway closed behind me. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved. "You're very good with her." Something like sadness flickered across his face. Children are easy to understand. They want safety, comfort, and to be taken seriously. Adults are far more complicated. We moved to the living room, where he poured 2 glasses of wine and joined me on the sofa, a respectable distance between us. "So this is the arrangement," I said after a comfortable silence. "Dinners and movies and domesticity?" His lips curved slightly, when possible. "There will be some events. A charity gala next weekend, a dinner at a restaurant I own, times when we'll be seen together publicly." "And the Cavalleros? Have they been watching?" Dante took a sip of wine before answering. "They've made inquiries. Discreet surveillance. Nothing threatening yet, but they're curious about you." "Should I be worried?" "Not as long as you're with me," he said with quiet confidence. "Victor Cavallaro is many things, but he's not reckless. Direct action against someone under my protection would spark a war he's not ready for." I studied him over the rim of my glass. "You make it sound so clinical. Is that how these tensions between families usually play out?" "Usually," he agreed. "It's business, ultimately. Territory, influence, profit margins. Occasionally it becomes personal, which is when things get messy. And this situation? Business or personal?" His eyes darkened slightly. "It was business. Until I involved you. The implication hung in the air between us, charged and dangerous. I changed the subject. "The room you prepared for Lily, it's perfect. How did you know what she'd like?" He seemed to accept the shift. "I asked my housekeeper. She has grandchildren." "Well, you went above and beyond. Thank you. It's no hardship to make a child comfortable," he said dismissively. Then, with a subtle shift in tone, "You're a good mother, Ellie. I've seen how you look at her, how you speak to her. She's lucky." The unexpected praise brought a lump to my throat. "I'm doing my best. It's not always enough." "It is," he contradicted gently. "You've created security for her despite your circumstances. That's what matters most to a child. Knowing someone is always there, always fighting for them." The specific understanding in his voice made me curious. "Do you have children?" "No." His answer was swift, final. "But you understand them well." He was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass. When he spoke, his voice was softer. "My mother raised 4 children alone after my father was killed. I was the oldest. 10 when it happened. I watched her fight to keep us safe, to keep us together when the system wanted to separate us. The revelation stunned me. This glimpse into his past felt more intimate than if he'd touched me. She succeeded," he continued. "Worked 3 jobs, never complained. Made us believe we were special, chosen, rather than abandoned." His eyes met mine. "So yes, I understand what it means to be the child of a mother who refuses to surrender." I found myself reaching for his hand before I could think better of it. "She sounds remarkable." She was. His fingers curled around mine, warm and strong. "She died 5 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry." "As am I." He squeezed my hand once before releasing it. "But her legacy lives on. Everything I've built, everything I am, began with her refusal to accept defeat." We talked for hours after that, about our childhoods, our dreams before life intervened, books we'd loved. I learned he'd put himself through business school working as a bouncer, that he spoke 4 languages fluently, that he traveled to Italy yearly to visit his father's hometown. I told him about my accounting degree, my love of painting that I'd abandoned for practicality, my hopes for Lily's future. Never once did we discuss his business empire or the specifics of how he'd acquired his wealth and power. Those shadows remained, acknowledged, but unexplored between us. When I finally yawned, unable to suppress my exhaustion, he walked me to the same blue guest room I'd used before. "Sleep well," he said, keeping a careful distance between us at the doorway. "You too," I replied, hesitating. There was a tension in the air, a possibility neither of us was ready to acknowledge. "Thank you for tonight, for being so kind to Lily." "It wasn't kindness," he said quietly. "I enjoyed her company, and yours." Our eyes held for a long moment before he nodded once and turned away. In the days and weeks that followed, we fell into an unexpected rhythm. Twice-weekly dinners at his penthouse, where Lily gradually claimed her princess room as her own. Weekend brunches at a private table in his restaurant, where he taught my daughter to eat spaghetti properly and never minded when she made a mess. A charity gala, where I wore a dress he'd had delivered. midnight blue silk that made me feel beautiful for the first time in years. Through it all, Dante maintained a careful distance physically while drawing closer in every other way. He learned Lily's favorite foods, stories, games. He noticed when I was tired and sent me home with prepared meals for the next day. He asked about my work, listened to my frustrations, offered suggestions that were never patronizing. Each time we were in public, his hand would rest at the small of my back, his body slightly angled toward mine, his eyes checking regularly to ensure I was comfortable. To anyone watching, we appeared to be a couple, perhaps even in love. Sometimes, in unguarded moments, it felt true. The promised financial support arrived as discreetly as everything else he did. A consultancy contract for a legitimate business he owned, paying me more for part-time work than I'd ever made at both my jobs combined. It allowed me to quit waitressing, to spend more evenings with Lily, to begin saving for her future. I knew it was an illusion, a temporary arrangement that would end when the month was up. But as the weeks passed and the deadline approached, I found myself dreading the return to reality more than I'd anticipated. Not just for the financial security, but for the man himself. For the way he looked at me as if I mattered. For the sound of Lily's laughter when he spun her around the living room. For the quiet conversations after she was asleep. When he shared pieces of himself I suspected few had ever seen. "Tomorrow is a month," I said one evening as we sat on his balcony, the city lights spread below us like a carpet of stars. Lily was asleep in her room, surrounded by toys he'd gradually accumulated for her. "Yes?" he agreed, his expression unreadable. "Our arrangement comes to an end." The words felt like a physical blow, though I'd been expecting them. "The Cavalleros? Have they lost interest?" "Largely. There have been other developments that have captured their attention." I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Then I suppose we should discuss the transition. How will explain my sudden absence from your life?" Dante was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "There is another option." My heart skipped. "What option?" "No transition," he said simply. "No explanation needed because there would be no absence." "I don't understand." He turned to face me fully, his eyes more vulnerable than I'd ever seen them. "Stay, Ellie. Not as part of an arrangement. Not for a predetermined time. Just stay." "Why?" I whispered, needing to hear him say it. "Because when you and Lily are here, this place feels like a home instead of a fortress. Because I find myself checking the time on days you're coming, counting the hours. Because—" He paused, his composure slipping for the first time since I'd known him. "Because I think I'm falling in love with both of you." The confession hung in the air between us, as terrifying and beautiful as a free fall. I reached for his hand, twining my fingers with his. "I think," I said softly, "that we might be falling in love with you too." When he kissed me, it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before, unfamiliar, yet perfectly right. His hands cradled my face with a gentleness that belied their strength, and I knew with sudden clarity that this dangerous man would never be dangerous to me or my daughter. "Stay," he whispered against my lips, and I did.